everyone in the room and also those following us through our live stream. My name is Enrique Ruiz, Deputy Head of Marketing of Tour España. It's a pleasure to be hosting this event. For the first time ever, Skift Megatrends in Spain, to my knowledge, and also in Fitur. So this is a big deal for us here at Tour España. We are all big fans of Skift. It's a publication that we don't fail to read. And today we're going to have the Megatrends, which is a helicopter, I would say, satellite view of what's going to happen in 2022. This event was hosted yesterday in New York City. And today, hot from the oven, we're going to have Kate Irwin, Commercial Director for Skift, and Jason Clampett, which is the co-founder of Skift, and also the Chief Product Officer. They're going to tell us what are the big trends that are going to shape the industry in 2022. So we're going to have first a presentation by Kate, the Skift Megatrends, and then we'll have a fireside chat, a debate between Miguel Sanz, General Director of Tour España, and Jason Clampett, co-founder of Skift. So fasten your seatbelt and enjoy. Thank you.
Good morning. It's an absolute pleasure to be here in person with you all. So thank you so much for coming and joining us. My name's Kate Irwin and I'm the Commercial Director for Skift. And I'm hoping that many of you will already know who we are. But for those who don't, we are the largest intelligence platform that is serving the travel industry today. This year we celebrate 10 years of deciphering and defining the future of travel. And as from that wonderful introduction, you already know what I'm here to talk about. Megatrends is our annual report that we produce every year to really look deep into the trends that we're going to be challenged with this year. So before we kind of dive into that, let's just add a little bit of context of where we are. So what happens now? We've never ever been in this position before. We've suddenly been faced with a crisis that caused the entire world to pause. So normally when you would start the front of the year, you're normally filled with optimism of all the realm of possibility that lays ahead. But right now, I'm sure that everyone sitting here, it's a mixture of optimism, apprehension, a bit of anxiety, fear, all rolled into one. However, at Skift, we are seeing really positive signs for recovery. It's great, and we're enthralled to see the range of change and development that's happening before our eyes. Some of these changes are long overdue. Some of them are inspired by the pandemic, but it's a good thing they're all happening. Right now, our industry is colliding with some of the biggest global challenges that we'll ever face. Climate change, equitable and sustainable growth, and human mobility, to name but a few. So in the report, which I all encourage you to go onto skift.com to download your own free copy, in the front you'll find a foreword from our CEO, Rafat Ali, and he signs it off so beautifully that I'm just going to steal his words. It says, forget the naysayers, dive into 2022 with optimism, intent, and purpose. So that's what we'll do. So let's dive into the trends. We don't have time today to go through all 14, so I've picked 4 that we'll talk about today. So the first trend we'll talk about is uncertainty is the new certainty. And it feels like an obvious statement, right? Who knows what's coming next? I'm sure that none of us were sitting here expecting to have another variant shoved upon us and for us to react accordingly. But what does that mean for your businesses? How do you prepare for the uncertainty. The reality is you can't plan for it. You need a plan A, a plan B, a plan C, D, E, F, all the way through. What we are seeing is that now strategies need to be flexible. You need to build that in. You need to be moving fast and adapt quickly to be able to keep up. I think knowing that there is so much change ahead of us and your core proposition or your core products and services can be stopped instantly, the priority will be to diversify your revenue streams. And that's fine for me to say up here, and it's definitely easier said than done. It's hard to redirect your focus away from your core market, your core product or your core offering. Get your whole team to shift focus and then at the drop of a hat shift back. But it's going to be those teams that build in flexibility, adapt quickly and can diversify that will last the longest and still be here to prosper. For example, Kayak do a great option of this. They have, of course, their travel division, but they also work alongside Open Table. And as they came through recovery, they found that Open Table and their restaurant promise bounced back a lot quicker than their travel did. It's never going to be the core proposition, but it's great to diversify and still have that revenue coming in. So as much as it might be obvious to say, this should be a primary factor that we add into any strategic planning. So trend 2, unbundling spreads across all services of travel. Now this is a controversial trend. Not everyone is going to like this. We've seen it and we've experienced it with our low-cost carriers. They're able to strip back the prices and give you a very, very appealing rate up front, enticing customers in, and then adding everything else on top. We've all been there and spotted that amazing fare from Ryanair usually, to a very nice sunny destination. And we go to book, the consumer's happy they're there, and of course it does fit on some occasions. We've seen cruise go into this area. They tried it back in 2018 when the major cruise lines stripped back their product offering. They got so much backlash in 2019, Carnival kind of retracted that offer. People are used to an all-inclusive price. We're also seeing it in theme parks. If you look at Disney, they offer a build your own vacation, build your own trip. You add your tickets to the theme park, then add your accommodation, food and beverage, and fast passes. But now we're seeing this really increase in the hospitality space. Citizen M are a prime example. Their offer is to give you a great rate on your room, and then you can pick and choose what selection of products you want to add. For me personally, as a business traveler, that's great. As a leisure traveler, I'm not so sure. So the jury's definitely out. When we spoke to MCR CEO Tyler Morse, he talked about the productization of the range of amenities that we have in hospitality. He referred to it as a la carte pricing. And of course, consumers are educated to a certain degree where they expect to be charged for breakfast, a late checkout, maybe even gym access. But it appears that now everything is up for grabs. It appears you can pick which floor, you get an additional cost, the Peloton studio, how close you are to the elevator, do you want coffee in your room? Apparently, these are all chargeable. However, some CEOs are not too sure. Marriott's CEO recently told us that he doesn't think it's possible for the Marriott customer to be happy with that approach. And I think there's always going to be an audience that is going to want bundled and unbundled options. So the jury's still out. Proceed with caution if you're going to go down this route. But it is a great way to optimize revenue in a state of recovery, an opportunity to really push up revenue in the time when it's needed the most. So trend 3, new booking patterns create novel opportunities. And of course, we've all seen this. We've all changed our terms and conditions, our cancellation policies, our flexibility, name changes, day changes. The question will be, how long will we continue to do this? And for an industry such as aviation, we've never seen them be so willing. So consumers are really enjoying this range of flexibility. It will be interesting to see when this reverses and if there's any resistance from consumers. But right now, everybody's embracing it. It enables consumers to feel comfortable and confident in booking. And when borders and government restrictions change so quickly, this is the only way that we can keep travel continuing. It also offers a new flexibility that we've never had before. Glenn Fogel, CEO of Booking Group, he mentioned that this new flexibility opens new windows for travel. Now we're able to work from anywhere. There's the opportunity to pop away for a long weekend more often, or even work from a different country. Colombia, for example, are embracing this and really focusing on the digital nomad target group. Then you also have the families. Suddenly they'll be able to work abroad in that 6-week holiday or that half term out of education. Brian Chesky of Airbnb also talked about re-categorization of travel. He said that 1/5 of stays that were booked on the site shouldn't even be classed as travel. They're over 30 plus days for this new audience that we suddenly have the availability to tap into. Again, with borders being so fluid, open and shut, he's found that 500 million people that are arriving on Airbnb are searching for an anywhere destination. So Airbnb are able to direct traffic to open borders and destinations that aren't full of over-tourism. I think with this, there's an opportunity to think beyond the normal realm of target audiences that we've had access to before. Yes, those booking windows are shorter, and of course we're now balancing that with a realm of cancellations. So it's always best to look at those two in tandem, but it does lead the question of what else is possible in this space. Moving on to my 4th trend and final trend, we'll look at climate resilience as the new ROI. And none of you will be surprised that we're talking about sustainability and climate. This isn't a new topic of conversation. I'm sure you're all ready to see action. And that's what we'll see in 2022. We will see action for many different reasons. One is definitely the fact that all of the large businesses that have been talking about climate action and sustainability for the last years will now be held to account. Not only are the consumers more aware and willing to hold brands accountable, you can only look at a recent Reuters article that talked about a Dutch win of Friends of the Earth. They were actually taking a number of different businesses who all have headquarters and holding them accountable. They won a legal battle recently to ask them to provide evidence of their actions toward climate change. And if they aren't able to do that, they will take them to court. It will be interesting to see how that evolves. But then we have the money, the investors, and they are now keenly watching which products, services, and destinations can offer a green service. This could mean that people will miss out on funding and investment if they aren't able to show that they are not just talking the talk, but they are walking the walk. If you look at Accor, for example, their CEO recently told us that he spent several hours walking the grounds of a new property only to decide that he would not build here. The land needed to remain as it is because after taking a very balanced view, he agreed that actually the benefits of the land much outweighed the benefits of building a new hotel. We've also seen Marriott join the Sustainable Hotel Alliance, and IATA come out with very bold ambitions for 2050 to be net carbon. Going back to investment, we're also seeing new investment take place. Etihad recently secured $2 billion on a loan that's the first of its kind. It's directly attributed to environmental and social and government targets. So again, the money is there. This isn't a short-term gain. We won't see direct impact on your bottom lines right now, but the long-term gain is definitely beneficial. We are seeing smaller properties, such as one in Edinburgh, decide to change how they would source their energy. And they reported they saved €25,000 in 1 year by changing how the hotel was powered. I think we'll see more accountability. Standards and regulations will increase. So this really is the year for action. So I will wrap there, but thank you for your time. And as a thank you from Skift, we are offering a discount code for Tour 2022 for any of our individual subscription products and any tickets to our European events. Both myself and Jason will be around after this session should you want to connect and come and talk. But we'd like to say thank you so much. And with this, I will hand over to the Q&A with Jason Clampett and Miguel.
You sit here. So, hola. Perdón, es verdad. Thank you. Hola a todos. Hola a todos. Hola a todos. Bienvenidos. Hello, Jason.
Hello.
Welcome to Spain's stand in Fitur. Welcome to Fitur. Thank you for coming. I'll be delighted to comment with you the trends and the new perspectives of tourism in the coming months and years.
Right.
And I want to express our sincere gratitude and thanks for not just doing these fantastic reports that you do, but also for coming to Madrid to present some of your Megatrends 2022. So thank you very much again. Right. And Kate, thank you again for presenting them.
Great. Well, it's great to be here, and I thank my colleague for doing some of the hard work early. Now, Miguel and I just need to have a good conversation about things you said and some other things. I think we wanted to start talking a bit about the sustainability portion of what we discussed earlier. The examples that Kate used were all coming from companies deciding that we need to do X to reach these goals. Let's flip it to the consumer side, though. As consumers are coming to destinations, they're traveling there as well as once they get there. What role do you see consumers playing in the sustainability, the future sustainability here?
Well, I think this is the key question for us destinations on how to manage our territories in the next few years, in the next few months. Because at the end of the day, we need to figure out if is sustainability a factor that interacts with pricing, for example. Are customers willing to pay more for more sustainable products and destinations? And if so, how much more? And if not, why not? Or what type of sustainability? What is the driving force of this sustainability movement? Is it just environmental sustainability? We also saw, and we remember in 2018 and 19, all these tourists go home signs in some of the most visited destinations or most popular destinations in the world. So what we need to see is, from our perspective, is to measure as much as possible how much or how customers value the sustainability efforts by destinations. But then it doesn't really matter if they value them a lot or not, because we do not have an option. We do have to meet sustainable criteria in the development of our destinations and in the management of our destinations. Is how to introduce those those factors into our marketing that we need to measure. And then also how and what topics do we use to make our destinations more appealing to customers. And I can put a few examples. I think is in many destinations, people need to know that their visiting is producing a positive impact in the destination and not a negative impact, and they might not want to find those tourists go home signs in the streets of a destination, and how their visit is improving the quality of life, not just in the macroeconomic term, but also in an everyday life perspective, in a everyday life perspective, how they are, seeing that their visit is improving that, or how their visit is not increasing the CO2 emissions of that country or visit or whatever, how they can compensate. We need to make, I think, and this is something that we're working on, we need to tell people, we need to help tourists and visitors how to make a trip more sustainable. Because we hear about sustainability all the time, and we do not know what we can do to make our trip more sustainable. We have some tips, but we need to learn more. We need to educate in a good way our visitors.
With the last 20 months of travel slowing or stopping in many cases, it gave us the opportunity to reassess across the industry, both as consumers and as people who work in travel and tourism and aviation and hospitality. And I think it also has provided some chances for companies to tell a new story to consumers, whether you're a hotel trying to explain, hey, we can't offer these services because of health and safety or because of staffing shortages or this. And I think it has allowed us to hit reset in a way. How beneficial do you think that will be to the sustainability story for hotels all of a sudden being able to say, hey, we're going to have an energy policy like X because it allows us to do this? Do you think people will be more receptive to that?
I do. I really think so. I think that this pandemic, as horrible as it has been, has allowed customers to see that there are different products, that there are things that matter, and not just pricing, and that there are different types of destinations, of products, of services. In Spain, for example, we've seen a huge increase in inland tourism, in nature tourism, in the visitation of the small villages, in the interest for less popular places. And that has given these places an opportunity to develop an industry, a tourism sector, a small one, but it's still effective to retain people in those places. We do have in Spain a huge disequilibrium, a population moving from inland Spain to the coastal resorts and to the archipelagos, and there's a national policy to retain people in these inland places in Spain. And I think tourism is this good for or force for good in the economic development or giving opportunities to these destinations. And this has been said for long, but it is now that consumers are willing to look at these other experiences in tourism. So I think that as horrible as the pandemic has been for the tourism industry, for the population, for the economy as a whole, it has broadened the spectre of experiences, destinations, and products that consumers are willing to look at least.
Mm-hmm. In terms of the kind of lessons that have been taught the last 20 months in terms of going to smaller villages or inland and things like that, in many countries, the domestic tourism had a really nice last 2 years comparatively. And I think consumer habits will change because of that, and less dependence upon foreign markets, which of course, then lower CO2 emissions and things like that. What do you think, as for tourism boards and professionals, what they can do to kind of keep that momentum going, to be like, okay, tourism still can be a force for good, and if everybody doesn't go to, let's say, let's take it out of Spain. If everybody doesn't go to Venice, you won't see the tourists go home signs when you go to this village. How do tourism boards keep that going?
I think that, in a way, we need to, because from Spain's perspective, we received 84 million visitors in 2019. Domestic tourism cannot even cope with half of that. I mean, domestic demand cannot cover an industry that is based on 84 million international visitors demand. So what we need to do is what we are doing is how do we appeal as a domestic destination to other European markets, for example. And with all these restrictions, our focus has been on how do we maintain, in an intra-European level, how we do maintain travel, EU travel, domestic. How do we tell, and I think that we were quite successful at that, how do we tell German consumers that coming to Spain was not going internationally, or it was as easy as to travel locally. Is that something that we can keep working on? I think yes, we need to, and I think that what you're saying is right, is people are rediscovering their nearby. What is nearby is open to redefinition. Higher speed train, more connectivity, is increasing the sense of what is nearby. For a British consumer or for a French consumer, Spain is the nearest beach they have around, and they will like to do that. But I think that we need to keep focusing on how do we maintain our attractiveness with our main markets, and
one of the things that Kate mentioned was about booking windows and booking types changing, and the Airbnb CEO's comment about how certain trips shouldn't be classified as travel, which I disagree with. It should be travel. You're going somewhere, but it is a new type of travel that's enabled for some types of consumers. People who have come out of the pandemic and have the flexibility to work anywhere, as opposed to before when they were tied to their desk, and some companies moving to 4-day work weeks and remote. So there's kind of a new class of consumer that might decide to, my sister's an academic, and so I've always been jealous of the 2 months she has during the summer. Of course, she does work, but she can kind of be anywhere she wants to be. And there's a whole class of consumer that can do that now. So somebody can decide to move to Spain for 2 months during the summer, and they might only take vacation for 2 weeks, but put their kid in a summer camp or something like that. How do you start thinking as a tourism board about that new kind of consumer, and what kind of holes they may be able to fill from the kind of long-haul foreign traveler or something like that?
I think that's really interesting. And we have seen that, that type of travel, and I do think it's travel, no matter that it's a longer travel, but it's still travel. It's happened naturally in some destinations in Spain, the Canary Islands, the Balearic Islands, some parts of southern Spain. The thing is that previous to the pandemic, we saw that with retirees, with retired people, people that spent the summer in Spain or the winter in Spain and then went back home during the summer months. and now it's happening with active workforce. I think there is a huge opportunity for some Spanish destinations. The thing is that you do and you need to adapt your product to that type of client. That takes risks because it is not the same product. You cannot offer the same type of things to someone who is visiting your hotel for 2 weeks or 1 week to someone who's going to be there for 2 months. You need to invest in the needs of someone who's staying for 2 months. You need to figure out what services do they need. You need to figure out what services they don't need. Maybe they won't need aqua gym, but they will need laundry service, more efficient or more cheaper. So this is something that they have to think, but it's very related also to regulations. That depends on the feasibility of active workforce, especially in Northern European countries, to be away from home while still working. Some countries are advancing very rapidly, especially the Nordic countries. Some other countries are just experiencing the first glimpse of what is home working. And I think that we will see an increase in this type of travel in the next few years. That is we are seeing now the tip of the iceberg of what home working means in the future. In Spain, we're already discussing the 4-day week. We are discussing home working. We're discussing on how to regulate that for the public sector, but also for the private sector. I do not know if it will be first regulation and then the offer of products and services to this type of traveler, or it will be the other way around, that reality will change the norm in the same way. But I think that that is something that we are seeing in Spain, and I do not know what are you seeing in Skift in other markets and in other destinations. But I think this is something that definitely is on the discussion table in Spain.
Yeah, I think we see a lot of destinations kind of struggling to figure it out, almost getting their sea legs about it as they try to determine, okay, do we allow this type of behavior, and I think, as in the case that we've seen with short-term rentals over the past decade, a lot of rules will get broken first, and then regulations will come in to kind of fix the things that are broken and make adjustments, whether it's more regulations for rentals in urban markets and looser restrictions in rural markets or less developed, it would be different. I think that in terms of new types of partnerships that may need to develop to foster this type of thing, outside of hospitality, do you see whether it's co-working spaces or startup funds or even cities using their economic development arms to lure people in to be like, hey, spend your 6 weeks this summer in Mallorca as opposed to 2 weeks in Florida.
Yeah, but also people with children, are they going to be able to move around places? What about the academic year? How does it work? Would this mean that there's an opportunity for international schools to allow people to move from one school to another school in the same academic year? Would it mean that I can, how do I organize my family if I am working for 6 weeks or 8 weeks in Mallorca? What do I do with my kids? Can they go to a local camp, or what services do I need to do that? And I think this is something that I would say that a majority of companies in specific destinations, as I said, the Canary Islands or the Balearics, are looking at, because they are seeing the demand, or they are already having an amount of demand on this. But it's something that we are just seeing the beginning of it, I think.
Right. Switching to some different types of restrictions, last summer, Spain, I think, reopened Mallorca for a bit in June, and it was kind of too soon, and had to kind of shut some stuff down. But I think we're at the point now where many consumers are comfortable with restrictions on travel and knowing that, hey, we all had to show a QR code to get in here to demonstrate that we've been vaccinated. And I think Spain has been excellent. They shut the door to England in December for a while for good cause. Do you think that's going to be a part of travel and tourism for the next 2, 3, 4 years? And do you think it's become normal?
Well, I hope no. But
if it has to be.
Well, yes. What we did in Spain, and I think it was the approach we had to take, is, as I said, we received 84 million visitors. We are not a small destination. We are the favorite destination of many people in the world. Once we say something, we need to be able to keep it. It was no good to take one step forward, two steps backwards. There were other destinations that said, okay, we're going to open and then let's see how it goes. Our approach was, we cannot do that because we're going to lose the trust and the confidence of people, not just traveling to Spain, but in travel as such. Because if it's complicated to travel to such a popular destination as Spain, what about, the rest of traveling? So what we did is, on June 7th, last Fitur, which happened in May, the president, the prime minister announced that we were going to open for vaccinated travelers on June 7th, and that was going to stick for good. That's what we did. We also followed the European Union recommendations about the green list countries to which you don't ask neither for a vaccination certificate nor additional testing, and that was the case of the UK. The numbers in the UK were really good, so we admitted UK travelers with no proof of either vaccination or testing. But then the numbers went up in the UK. So what we did is we applied the same restrictions that to the rest of the world, to the UK. The thing is that the UK was not vaccinating people under 16, and we required, in line with other European Union countries, people over the age of 12 to be vaccinated. And there was a controversy saying, okay, we don't have our under 16s vaccinated, allow them in with a PCR or antigen test. The problem was that age group was the highest
transmitters
in the UK at that time. So it was counterintuitive and counterproductive to say, okay, we're going to allow only the vaccinated ones who are vaccinated in, but we're going to allow in also the most transmitters in the UK. The UK is now finally vaccinating people over the age of 12 as well. So this problem will be solved as people get vaccinated. And we are working on that with the UK government. What I think is we have a responsibility, and I don't think that we governments have been very good at coordinating ourselves to give confidence sometimes in a world scene. Mm-hmm. We have done it to our own people, in our own boundaries, but I think the world needed more coordination among the countries of the world to produce confidence and to produce norms that were standard for at least the majority of these countries in the world. Mm-hmm. And we ended up having 200 different restriction models. We ended up having, even in the European Union, we ended up having different norms for the same type of travels that made difficult for people to understand which norms were good or not. Mm-hmm. And they also made people difficult to travel. They incentivized travel. If that was the purpose, they did their job, but they also confused the people and prevented the people to have confidence in the future. Mm-hmm. So what I think is what we need to do is to have a better coordination among countries, make sure that the norms we produce are understood by the consumer, make them understand that they are efficient, give reasons to why those norms and those restrictions need to be implemented, and then be consistent with these introductions. I do think we will have to live with a number of restrictions. I don't think the face mask is going to, to disappear, for example, in air travel or train travel. I think that is going to stay for a while at least. But we need to, and I think the airlines did a very good job in explaining the consumer how did it work when you went into a plane. How did it work? Why was it secure to travel by plane? What filters did they have? How was the air working when you were in a plane? How is the air circulation functioning? And I think this is very important that, okay, there is this restriction, we have put up these measures.
And here's why.
And this is why.
Yeah.
And then some people will have to make decisions and informed decisions. It doesn't need to be a restriction, a prohibition all the time. It needs to be an informed decision. Because we do, travel to places where malaria is endemic.
Yeah.
And we do it at our own risk. And there is not a vaccine yet for malaria, and we do travel to these places. But we make adult and informed decisions. And I think that we need to go to this phase in this pandemic as well.
We talked a bit about tourism numbers at the beginning, and 2020, Spain, like many other places, lost 80% of tourism, and 2021 things came back a bit. 2022, we're all optimistic that we'll be 75 to 80% of the way to what 2019 was. And we do a lot of research. We've got data divisions at Skift. We focus on numbers. Do you think there's too much focus on numbers with that? And what's the new measurement for success?
I think that we're
big picture, not just Spain.
Yes, no, but we need to focus on numbers. The thing is that sometimes we're looking at the numbers we shouldn't be looking at. For example, in the case of sustainability, we haven't still been able to develop measures or data that give us a clear picture of how sustainability works in tourism. Environmental, social, economic sustainability. We're looking at numbers that we were looking 30 years ago, 20 years ago, or we think that because we look at mobile, data now, we know more. No, mobile data tells you the number of people that is in one place, and we've been measuring that for a number of years now. What we need to focus on is, first, I think most destinations, more companies have now established clear objectives about things like sustainability, social impact of our destinations, economic, all of these things. We need to make sure that the data we are looking at, the numbers we are looking at, are relevant to make decisions that allowed us to go to these objectives. And sometimes I see people obsess about the numbers, and they look at a huge amount of different data sets, and I say, like, are these numbers helping you to make decisions about this that you are aiming to achieve? Are they related? And I think we need to get, maybe younger generations are different, but we need to get educated about more data is not always the best solution. More data, we need more relevant data, not more data as such. And I think that what companies and publications like Skift help us to do is to differentiate or to choose better what type of data we need, what type of for what we want to do. It's not just data for the sake of data, it's data to make a decision. At the end of the day, data is only used to help you take decisions. And this is something that I think is very important. I think we need to finish. Questions? Yes. Sorry. Are there any questions? I think there is a micro there.
We've been speaking about trends, but what about disruption? Because in the last 10, 15 years, we've seen a lot of disruption, the pandemic, for example. And in the next future, for example, the electric cars are here and are changing the model of not buying a car, leasing it. And then in the next future, I think we are going to see more disruptions. There's a way to looking at this.
I think just being flexible constantly. I think any destination that gets kind of stuck in their ways of we do this because of this way or because of, you can look at, let's say, tourism boards in the United States, urban tourism boards there, they're financed largely by hotels. So they couldn't really think of a response or figure out how to communicate with companies that were doing short-term rentals in urban markets. So you had these two kind of parallel universes happening because their financial model depended on not knowing what was happening over here. And so I think places that are kind of ready and open to all sorts of different new things best position themselves for that. So you mentioned transportation. Electric cars are okay, but they lower carbon emissions, but they're still within the same mindset of a personal vehicle taking you from one place to a next. But how do we think more of better public transportation, smarter public transportation, human-powered travel, whether by cycle or by walking or things like that, or even the bigger picture of how do you develop urban markets so that there's a greater density so that travel is different. And so I think being ready for disruption is basically being an optimist, one, and then just being open to, a great way, open to profiting off of smarter ideas in the future as opposed to just kind of what you're currently doing. And I think the companies that have done well the past 22 months were really ready to just kind of change everything at a moment's notice if they could and be ready for that. So I think you mentioned 10 years of disruption and, the last, 20 months are, 10 years in a much smaller period.
But also I think that the pandemic was the biggest of the disruption. It was the mother of all disruptions.
It made us look back to 2008.
Yeah.
It's like, global financial crisis is okay.
It was the mother of all disruptions. And what we saw is that, Germany is a very price-conscious market, and then they look at prices and they hate inflation, and then what they discovered is that the consumer was willing this past year to pay more because they thought that flexibility was an added value to their purchase. So companies that thought, okay, there's going to be a war price because there's a lot of offer and very few travelers, found out that those travelers that, were willing to pay more just for something that they valued, that was flexibility. And some companies increased their, average spend by their customers because they were willing to pay more, especially hotels. It hasn't been the case, for example, in airlines, but it has been the case in hotels, at least in Spain, which prices have not gone down. If anything, they have gone up during the last summer season. So I think there is a disruption, and there is always ways to articulate how do you respond to that disruption, I think. Mm-hmm. We finished? One question? No? Two?
So we have to wrap up in 2 minutes. So last question. Thanks a lot for this session. It was fantastic. And I have a big question here. So
you only have 2 minutes.
2025, right? Let's say the pandemic is over. So you have mentioned some trends that could be reversed. For instance, flexibility in cancellation policies. So now take out the crystal ball and tell us which of the trends we are seeing are going to stick and stay, and which ones are not. So what changes that we have seen from the pandemic you think will stay for good?
We've done this for about 10 years, and for the first 5 years, I went on the road quite a lot doing it, and usually in May and June, we'd visit corporate headquarters and do what we called a Monday morning quarterback version, where we would say, okay, here's what we've got right so far, here's what we've got wrong. So 5 years in advance, I'd say, looking back, a lot of things turn out to be naive, but I think focusing on the consumer behavior stuff, I think has been the most valuable in retrospect. I think the unbundling is very interesting. When you look back at 2008 and the financial crisis, the mistake that a lot of companies made was they lowered prices so much that consumers started to expect things to be ridiculously low. I think that, as you mentioned, hotels didn't make that mistake this time around, and they started to tell a different story about what the price was, and explaining what the value proposition really is. And I think consumers were receptive to that. And so I think we'll see that continue. I don't know if we'll see the airlines continue to be as flexible as they are now. It's kind of like, the boyfriend or girlfriend who said they'd change, and they changed for a little while, and then, I worry that that's going to be the airlines here, unless they look at all the data that they've had over the last 20 months and been like, okay, we actually see opportunities here to create a more flexible product that we offer to more people, and let's go with it. So I think that'll be interesting. But I think the only trend you can bet on is consumers becoming smarter about the choices that they make because they have more information at their disposal. And hopefully then people within the travel industry being able to take that same information and offer them something even better. Because if just going back 10 years since we started Skift, the products in hospitality and aviation and destinations are so much more sophisticated than they were a decade ago, that it would have been hard to imagine at that time how much more sophisticated things are. So 5 years from now, we'll be even further along.
Okay, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
And make sure you all read Skift.
And visit Spain.